If you're wondering whether this is a dressing gown, it is. Maybe I should wear this all the time and call it my chessing gown. That would be quite bad, wouldn't it? This is actually game 4 rather than game 3 because I've just recorded a game and I had 2 chess.com windows open and I captured the wrong one in OBS, so I just recorded a board without pieces moving. However, it was a pretty rubbish game that I won in no time. The opponent was doing bizarre things, so I think we're gonna record a second game today, see if we can get something better. So we get, I always get confused, is that Indonesia? So it is. What does Poland's flag look like? I don't know why I'd confuse that with Indonesia. I guess because it is red and white. Is it red and white the other way? I'll have to look that up. Anyway, we've got some weird opening from them, so we'll just occupy the centre because that's what you do. Right, so this is kind of like the Wayward Queen attack thing, but with the pawn on e3 instead of e4. And I do know it's possible to allow that pawn to be taken, because I think that's called the kiddie counter gambit. So shall we let the pawn be taken just for fun? I don't think the fact that this pawn's 1 square behind makes any difference. But if anything, I would have thought it would be better for black, so let's allow it. Let's see if we can trap the queen. Of course, we have to block with the bishop. But at the cost of this pawn, the queen is now a sitting duck, isn't it? The question is the best way to continue to castle to hit the queen straight away with knight c6. If I kick it with d6, that kind of blocks my own bishop in future. I can play this. Yeah, I quite like d5. It takes escape squares away for the from the queen in future. Gains tempo on the bishop. If it does 2 good things, it can't be bad, especially at this level. Puts a pawn in the middle, which is what you're supposed to do. If you're wondering whether this is a dressing gown, it is. Maybe I should wear this all the time and call it my chessing gown. That would be quite bad, wouldn't it? But now I'm thinking whether I want to, rather than do knight c6, go for a knight d7, because it does gain tempo, and maybe it would be better to play c6 after that to lock their bishop out over here. I do interfere with the defense of this though, so we'll just go for the normal route. This is definitely a more interesting game so far than the one that I failed to record. I thought I was doing it wrong, and then I looked in OBS and I had two chess.com windows, and yeah, I just recorded an empty board. My assumption is that queen will retreat to here. In that case, I can attack it again with knight g5, which looks a bit rubbish, but they go for this. Is castle's best? Might be. Because on the next move, lots of bad things can start happening for white. Doesn't seem great. I'll add a defender here. That allows me to play knight e4. I can trade the bishop off for this knight. They're just going for it, are they? But what do they do now? Because if they put the queen here, why don't I just do this? Slightly annoying that the queen, it does look like it's going to escape. However, is it going to escape? They're going to play queen f3. They're going to play there. Yeah, of course, that's better. Hang on though. I'm just wondering about whether, see, if I play queen f6, although that threatens to win the game here, they'll presumably just play f3 or even knight f3. But a player this strange could well play f3. There are probably sacrifices here that are winning for me. Like knight takes f2. Or do we just come over and attack on the queen side? This shouldn't be difficult. Actually, d4 looks interesting. Because although it allows them to take this bishop, I'm going to play this here. Start trying to get to their king. If they trade off the bishop, it opens up, and yeah, it's kind of what I was hoping for. We open up this attack. Didn't think of that. It's not a bad move, is it? Shame we haven't got a pawn to play en croissant. Okay. I think my follow-up should be Queen f6, followed by e5. If takes, I checkmate on the back rank. And also now they've weakened here, because they're going to fianchetto the bishop presumably. I'm kind of looking at the rook. They might do that if they don't do this one, which would be, it wouldn't do much, would it? So I'll continue with this. Doesn't do anything. I can also take on e3, opening up this file. I'm just going to take here. I forgot my bishop was here attacking this square as well. So it's a pawn. They decide to go that way. And this pawn is actually pinned because, of course, if it moves I can take the bishop in the corner. Nobody puts my bishop in a corner. I could take it now with the knight. Because although that looks like it's pinned, I can play knight c2 check. Pick up the bishop. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Don't know if it's best, but it looks alright, doesn't it? Right, so they start doing very aggro things. So I think the simplest thing to do is to move the knight here and then bring the rook to the middle. And is it checkmate? No, because I can't take this rook on the back rank yet. I was about to blunder. I was thinking I could just take this knight, but the queen's here. You don't often see a queen on that square, do you? So I nearly let them back into the game. Hold on. Is this checkmate? Is there a checkmate here? I wonder if they'll interpose with the... No, do that. Can't I just start giving checks like this? King has to go here, unless they move the knight in the way. That looks bad. I can give check. I'm trying to see. Okay. Yeah, rook doesn't quite work because they can take here. I can just do this with check. And then if they step here, do a cheeky little pawn, whatever that is, pawn f3 check. There's an attack on the queen. Or is this checkmate? Yeah. But we'll do this. Oh, I've got myself confused because my queen's also under attack. But I'm 5 points of material up somehow. If takes, queen takes, but then 2 of my pieces will be attacked. How about just this? So they have to deal with the threats that are incoming, which I don't think they can deal with, because he can't just... If he picks up the knight, he's done, right? Must be. Yeah, because I'll just take with check. And that'll be good enough. Of course, if he does that straight away, then I'll just take the queen. If the queen moves to defend this knight, which it can't do because it's attacked twice anyway, isn't it? So I think white should resign. And this is another case of playing an absolutely ludicrous opening, I think. And just so the knight can't move. It's a shame I can't put my rook on e3, because he still has defence of that square. Maybe this is still... Oh, hold on. Rook takes. Queen takes, queen takes. King recaptures my queen. Is there a way to save the knight? Not really. Not really. I don't know why I make these games so difficult. I do know why, it's because I'm not very good, but this just looks like there just should be... Just going to take it. Okay, oh no. I was thinking, yeah, again that I could give check here, but... And that would somehow allow me to save this knight, but it doesn't, does it? What about if I do it this way? It doesn't work, does it? How annoying. I knew there was a way. It's all good. I think that that's not a problem, is it? Because I can just take a pawn there, which solves any remaining problems over here. White can't exchange because they're massively down on material. I'll just go there. Probably quite slow play, but I was thinking if I play rook e8, either he has to trade off or allow me to give check here, which probably picks up this knight as well. And of course this pawn is loose. But I really shouldn't... I think a way of being better is to realise that this pawn it's not doing anything. What I should be trying to do is to checkmate this king. I imagine they'll go... Oh, they do that one. Oh, that allows this though. I was going to say I thought they'd go rook c1 and tickle this pawn, but I could just play c6 then. Okay. They trade off the last remaining bit of stuff. I'll take this now. They are going to have... I'm going to kick it like this. I didn't notice that. Shouldn't matter. I just want to keep this pawn instead of this one, because this pawn prevents this pawn, this d pawn of white's, from doing things. And then I think I can just bring the knight back into the centre. Knight f4, knight d, whatever that is, d5. Yeah. Maybe play g6 to let my bishop onto this diagonal. Pick up some pawns over here, maybe. Where are they going next? They want to play check here. Does it do anything? I can just do this as well. Oh, that loses a pawn. I didn't see it. They could have forked me here. And then actually I'd probably start losing, wouldn't I? Right, we need to do this. That fixes that. If they play b4, I will win that pawn with a fork. White should resign, really. I mean, I think this is a situation where you kind of... You're spazzing out a bit, aren't you? And what are they going to do? They're going to do that. Now, is their knight trapped? Not quite. Almost. Yeah. We'll take the opposition. Now their pawns can't move. We'll do it again. Pick up this pawn. Pick up this pawn. That does nothing, so we'll just... Yeah, we'll just make a queen. Again, I'm just trying to not allow stalemate. I do think people should have a resign button, but I've drawn games by stalemate so many times, so that's another one of my major chess weaknesses is getting a position like this, making a queen, and then just launching the queen to a random square, and then the stalemate dialogue comes up, and it's irksome. So, having said that, Black still has a chance to not lose against me. Running down the clock like this, though, is a bit, it's a bit of a bell-end move, isn't it? Yeah. They should click resign. Although they played a bit of a bell-end opening. That kind of Wayward Queen sort of thing is... I think when I was playing regularly, you stop seeing that at about, I'm going to say 1200-ish. No, I wouldn't say it's totally disappeared at that rating, but because I used to play the, I think it's the kiddie counter gambit where you allow the pawn to be taken. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I lost a fair few games from that position, but it results in quite an interesting game where you've just called their bluff, essentially, allowed their queen to walk into the middle of the board, and then the game, they've abandoned. Oh well. Yeah, we'll have a quick look at the review then. Okay, so here we are with a little bit of a run through of that last game. Incredibly, the opponent was nearly 1100 rated. I think some of the moves they made were more like 11 rated, but probably some of mine were too, so let's have a look. This is initially, it's rubbish already. And you may say that is not very insightful, but it just is, isn't it? It's not insightful, it's just that this just is rubbish. You know, there's just no need to play e3. But we get, as I mentioned, this kind of pseudo Wayward Queen attack. And I guess the game starts at this point where I've allowed the pawn to be captured. I like how they kind of snap took the pawn as if I hadn't noticed. And so we got to this position, and you can see the evaluation bar's already starting to swing in my favour. This was the point at which this was my first bit of deliberation. And I guess it's not good to be deliberating on move 4. I think couldn't really decide between kicking the queen, playing the move I did play, developing the knight. I noticed the computer actually wants me to play c5, which is not something I considered. I can't see any immediate tactical reasons that is better than playing d5. Unless c5 is a kind of preparatory move. Let me see. If I play c5, it thinks white should play this. Yeah. And then I should play d5. Although I do open this diagonal, don't I? But maybe the thing is that the bishop is starting to become trapped. Having said that, the top line of the engine is this. So I just think I would never, even if I did, I suppose I would be capable possibly of considering playing this before the central pawn, with the intention of maybe trapping the bishop, but I would never, unless it was a line that I knew, of course, I would never just voluntarily decide that it was superior to block in my own rook and do all that kind of stuff. However, I did that, which, the computer obviously doesn't hate. It maintains black's advantage. I think it's the most obvious move. I think the most obvious move is developing the knight straight away, which also isn't bad, I imagine. They do the probably the only thing they can do in response. Yeah, the computer thinks that castles is better than c5, but ever so marginally. And at this point, Queen g3 is best for white. But they're already running out of decent moves, I think. Because, when you've got to move the queen this many times, it just allows me to get all my bits out, doesn't it? I was wondering in the game, I just kind of quickly decided that castles was best. I thought maybe there could be some lines where you just don't even bother to castle and allow this capture. And win the queen, but all that looks a bit dangerous, so this was the best move apparently. And now the computer wants white to play d4, which is, that's entirely explicable, because while white's got a chance to not have to move their queen, they should occupy the centre. And really this is the, we were 1.1 up on the evaluation bar. And that's just one of those moves that looks bad, but it doesn't look like the computer would evaluate it as, as something that's as bad as losing a whole pawn, but apparently it is. I imagine that white has realised that the snatch of the pawn is in the opening is going wrong, and maybe they think they can just fire this pawn down the board and checkmate me. Let me see. So I played bishop e6. A kind of... Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I said at the time, I did it to add protection to the central pawn, so that I could then move the knight. The engine does want me to play h6, though, to kick the queen. I think I didn't mention it, but I suppose I kind of try to avoid playing these kind of moves, because then, it kind of invites a pawn storm, but I suppose white's queen's totally offside here, and it's preventing its own pawns from moving. So, because if I played h6, if we went h6, queen g3, an obvious follow-up would be to play bishop whatever that is, d6. Still, the queen can escape to this, to the f3 square though. But then it comes under attack again with knight e5. I guess at that point the best thing to do for black would be to put the queen back where it started. Which shows just how badly they're playing, actually. It's comical in a way, but... there we go. But I played that. They carried on trying to... I suppose they just want to get h6 and hope that I don't notice. which is, it's slightly wishful thinking. I'm just wondering why the engine doesn't like this move of the knight into the centre. Oh, that's quite good, isn't it? Oh, I've just missed it. It wants me to play knight g4 and the queen has to go to f4. And now it wants me to play d6. Sorry, bishop d6. Yeah. So just generally more harassment of the queen, who's only, who escapes to this side of the board. But I think by the time that sequence is played out, they've lost, I can't even count the number of tempos they've lost there. Tempos, whatever you call them. However, we did this instead, which, it maintains a solid advantage. They go over there, of course. I do this. And, it looks... This is very obvious stuff, isn't it, that I'm doing, but the advantage is actually slipping away. And I think that although I know these kind of Wayward Queen openings are bad, I'm obviously not great at punishing them. Yeah, because I allow white to sneak away with his tail between his legs into the corner, but black's advantage is actually less than 1, so I think I was saying yesterday, I kind of consider anything less than 1 to be a level position, which it's not, but you need to be a better player to be able to really consider these kind of 0.8s and less a concrete advantage. And why did I go for... The computer wants me to play a5. Presumably it just wants a5, a6. At which point the bishop would be trapped. Yeah. Thing with that is, though, it then thinks the best continuation for black is this. That strikes me as quite odd. I guess is that right? Am I seeing things? It wants a5 and at depth 21 it's asking white to play h6, and then not to play. Oh yeah, it does want bishop takes h6, and then it wants, and only then. That's strange, isn't it? I think that's one of those things that very few humans would do. I mean, obviously the threat is obvious, to take on g7 and then checkmate's incoming here because of the queen and rook battery here against h7, but yeah, it seems odd. I guess that's why chess is difficult. If the good moves were easy to spot, then everyone would be a GM, wouldn't they? But I think my choice of d4, once again, although the advantage, gets almost back to parity, really. I think that's a very, very natural follow-up. Interestingly, the computer thinks this is the best move for black. From a human perspective, opening up all these lines to your own king while your pieces are sort of sat on the back rank is incredibly counterintuitive. Yeah, it just wants this to happen, and then knight f3. At which point it wants us to jump in with the knight threatening here. But I would never get to that point, because, I think my focus, even if the game had gone like this and they had played f3, knight f3, I might even have allowed them to trade the knight off for the bishop, because my queen would have then entered the game. And, white hasn't got time to take here, because then we would capture the pawn on g2, and be threatening checkmate here and be hitting this rook. And if the rook moved off the back rank, we could just take this knight, and that would be... no, it wouldn't be checkmate, because they'd still have the e2 square. But it'd be close to checkmate. So I think that's a bit of... it's a position that the computer analyses as fairly equal, but in human terms, I think if you asked any human here, do you want the black pieces or the white pieces? A semi-normal human's gonna, they're gonna take black every time, aren't they? So that rant over, they lash out, which I didn't expect them to do. I thought the only possible moves, not possible moves, the only probable moves for them were f3 or knight f3. Yeah, the engine's saying that knight b4 is now best, and it really wants white to defend with knight a3. I suppose the pressures, so many pieces are streaming in towards the white king at this point that it hasn't got time to what looks like a juicy piece to capture. I think that's very difficult to spot though, because if you do allow this capture, you've got two pawns headed in, looking to actually get counterplay. So that would never have happened with me in the game. But this did, and this, and this, and this, and I just dropped back. So we're maintaining a fairly stable advantage, but it's not, I'm not winning in computer land by as much as I thought I would be. And this move actually is, the first time the evaluation bar really goes mad. Still wants knight b4. I mean, I didn't completely overlook that, I just didn't mention it because I just thought the most direct way to checkmate the king was to put the queen on f6 or something, or start taking the pawns in the middle to remove the king's protection. On the other hand, I suppose, it's a way of threatening to win a whole rook. And a whole rook can't be bad, can it? No, it can't be. See, again, although I'm, in my mind I'm bringing pieces into the game that are going to checkmate white, that's seemingly what I would think of as a principled move. Don't want to go, maybe not, maybe that's a bit of a posh chess cliche to say principled move, but if the aim of the game is to checkmate this king, then you would have thought that putting the queen here is serving that purpose. But anyway, yeah, and I think it's unsurprising that the evaluation stays stable there, even though there's a lot of pawn tension in the middle of the board. The knight looked kind of weird, just hanging around there in this pawn formation. And once again, white is... See, the thing is, even though the computer can pick out lines where white can maintain some kind of semblance of a game, maintain their chances, there's probably like one, maybe only one, or maybe two moves available to white that they've got to find, whereas I can kind of get away in this position with going anywhere. Like I can do this. The evaluation stays massively in my favour. I could have gone here. I probably could have put a rook in front of their king. Whereas white's got to kind of find only moves. And when you're rated 1100, you're not going to find them. Yeah. See, I thought this was here is the third engine line, knight takes d4. It prefers f3. That's strange, isn't it? Because I didn't consider f3. Oh look, because I didn't notice that upon f3. f3. But then if knight takes f3, which would be the obvious thing to do, this pawn is then protected. But the engine still wants white to castle. Wow. And then it wants me to do this. Once again, that is not something that would cross my mind. If I was white, I'd be thinking about long castling, but the first thing I'd want to do is get the knight on, to develop this knight in order to blockade the progress of this pawn. Even if I didn't see that there was a potential attack here if the pawn advances. Because, you've got to get your bits out, haven't you? So, in the game I took the pawn, and this is what I mean about having to find only moves. White does this and, the evaluation bar just plummets. It still thinks that f3 is the best move. And apparently there's a mate in 15 if I play f3. So if anyone's watching this and they can spot mate in 15, I'm happy to report the move I played, which is knight takes c2, is the second best move. So that's, that's reasonable. Yeah, so my follow-up line still maintains a huge advantage, obviously, but I don't think we can be expected to be considering mate from 15 moves in advance. This is another, to be honest, this might be, what's the word? I didn't even consider en croissant. And I don't know why, because, taking en croissant is just the best thing, isn't it? It's what everyone wants to do. And apparently upon en croissant we've got mate in 6. I suppose I moved the knight, didn't I? Yeah, I guess the reason that I just tunnel visioned the knight there is I saw the rook trapped in the corner and I thought, well, I'm winning massively and I win an exchange, and it's also the fact that the knight's in danger of being taken, so it's difficult to think further. It's to think beyond, well, I win an exchange and I win an exchange while saving a knight from being captured. It's difficult to to have deeper thoughts than that about chess. On the subsequent move, I think I mentioned I almost didn't notice that I thought the knight was hanging, because I think I said something about you don't see queens on this square often, which is, it's very true. Like, you expect the queen to just be, you don't expect it to be here. So even though you've been looking at it there for like the last 5 minutes, your brain just decides that it isn't there. And mate in 15, mate in 12 apparently has just come up. Yeah, it's very interesting. It just keeps wanting me to play f3. Again, it's difficult to spot because you unprotect the knight and you think, oh, I'll just lose my knight. But upon the capture of the knight, then we've got the obvious follow-up of f2. Just shoving pawns in their face. But I think that's also characteristic of the way I play. Like, I'll get a pawn halfway or, into the opponent's half of the board, and I'll kind of forget about the fact that it's supposed to keep going. It just seems too rude to keep pushing this pawn somehow. So they played this. Don't know why. At least I suppose it was good that I looked for checks instead of just taking a free pawn, because I think a lot of the time you see it, you see a free pawn, take a free pawn it's not the best thing to do. Although the computer wants rook A, E8 check straight away. And in fact, that's just because if I give check with the rook, they have to step onto this square or this square. Well, if they go here, the knight drops with check and the queen is skewered. So it's mate in 10 because it wants black to play knight e2. Say what? There is no. Oh. It wants knight e2. That just looks horrendous, doesn't it? Well, it's coming up as mate in 9, so it is. It is indeed horrendous. But we got this. Just maintaining the huge advantage, really. And this. And this. And again, I start letting white kind of not come back, but swing the evaluation bar slightly. And did I say black? I keep mixing up the colours. When I'm black, I keep saying white, and when I'm white, I keep saying black. But yeah, I'll kind of allow them a little bit of a reprieve. I think that is a I'm going to say that while before I think I said one of my moves was principled, I think just taking the rook here is unprincipled. Not only because if I can play many things, can't I? But it's stuck in the corner behind its own pawns, and my knight is doing all kinds of good things over here. It's participating in a mating attack. So although I win the exchange and give check, I think it's not that difficult to see why it's not the best way to play. But I did it anyway. And I think also I was also deliberating this tactic or extolling the virtues of this tactic, and I could have gone like this, couldn't I? Which is a sensible way to save the knight, although the evaluation bar does drop to a mere 6.8 in my favour. But I didn't think about this because I was tunnel visioning this. It's that kind of fuck you, no fuck you kind of thing. You attack, how dare you attack my queen, I'm going to attack your queen. But it's not always, it's probably, well, I don't know about not always, I mean, I don't know what the percentage of time it's best to do that. Of course, it doesn't really matter because I'm winning so massively, but I think it still illustrates you know, another reason that chess is harder than it seems. Not harder than it seems, everyone knows it's difficult, but we got to this position, and now mate in 7's appeared for us, so should we be spotting mate in 7? The computer says... Oh. King takes h1. Well, you know, every line is mate in 7. But I played... Okay, so rook takes actually maintains this sequence. Right. Apparently there's mate in 3 in this position. Oh dear. You see, I did not look at rook e2 check. So I kind of vacillate between thinking, must give check, look for all the checks, and then the queen blocks, and because I'm winning, I just think, oh well, I'll take, but actually, you know, I can finally bring the rook to the second rank. If the queen goes, you know, where can the queen go? It can only really go over here. And it's game over, isn't it? I just do this. Yeah, so that was quite a... although the game's kind of done and dusted at this point. Since checks are the first move you're supposed to evaluate, I should have evaluated this check. Even though I can trade the queen off in a massively winning position. So had I evaluated the check, I would have seen the follow-up and I would have got the mate in 3, but I did this and then this. And, you know, the advantage is shrunk. Still 6 though, so it's just that, you know, there's too much dancing around, isn't there? There's also... If we go back to here, you know, why didn't I play? I could have done this, couldn't I? And what are they going to do then? But I didn't think of that either. So we kind of, you know, we danced around a bit. Pieces get traded off. I think other than missing the mate in 3, this was my other big mistake in the game. Because I saw the knight come here and thought, oh, they can give check. And then for some reason moved here and, you know, allowed them a check that could have won this pawn. They could have, you know, they could have taken here. Still completely winning, but that's a thing that, you know, everyone suffers from, isn't it? You get towards the end game, especially if you're low on time, but I'm not low on time, so I think it's if you're going to get better at chess, you need to not walk into these obvious knight forks. But they missed it, and I think at this point, you know, I don't know what they're doing. I guess they're just one of those players that hasn't got a resign button. Yeah, they have no resign button because I think they aborted the game. But yeah, there we go. We've actually so we're showing a rating of 1125, so not as bad as I thought it might be. I think once I've played for a couple of weeks, then I'll start looking into doing things to actually improve, but I want to see where we get to rating wise and let it stabilise. But thanks very much.